Okay, everybody, all our listeners, educators, students, welcome to our podcast, to my podcast. This is the Edu Unlocked with me, Ashish Fernando, your host. And as usual, we bring in some of the most thoughtful leaders from education to talk to us at our podcast. But today is a special day. We have William Gaudelli, Will, who's the dean at Lehigh University. He's been the dean of the College of Education and is the eighth dean there. Bill, welcome to my podcast.
Thanks, Ashish. Great to be here.
Fantastic. I've known you for a while, Bill, and it's been some great conversations. I'm happy that we're taking some of that out to the public now, just help them understand some of how you think and how you've really shaped up Lehigh, how your own personal life's shaping up, and I'm sure there's a lot to learn from it today.
Great. Looking forward to it.
All right, awesome. I will start with a quick introduction of Bill's amazing career that spans about 30 years. And it
I think we're up to
started,
35 now. I think we're up to 35 now. So yeah.
oh, update. Yes, update
Time
35
flies.
years. Wow,
Yeah,
that's fantastic. That's humbling, Bill. I mean, it's you've got more than double the experience as me. And it started as a classroom teacher, gone up
that's right.
to researching, being a professor, being an administrator, and now dean at the College of Education. Fantastic, and congratulations on a really worthwhile career.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Amazing. So just quickly for our listeners, Bill or Dr. Gaudelli he's the chair. He's now the dean. He served as the chair of Department of Arts and Humanities at Teachers College at Columbia University. And before that, he was a faculty member and program director of the Social Studies program there. Before Columbia, he held the position of associate professor and program supervisor at UCF, University of Central Florida. So that's a lot right there, and some of the
Yeah.
best institutions in the US. And Bill, out of all of those experiences, is there any particular highlight uh, that you would like to share with us? Something that you did not expect going into one of these roles at these institutions, and it really transformed the way you look at higher ed.
Yeah, such a great question. I mean, I think I look back in my career. So before I was at UCF, I was a classroom teacher, as you mentioned, in Hunterdon County, New Jersey for 10 years. And I think each institution where I've served, I've learned both more about myself, but also about the institution and its fit in the landscape. As a classroom teacher, I learned about the significance and the importance of having content and information, knowledge really connect with students, that they had to see some relevance and connectivity to what we were talking about in class to the world beyond the classroom. And so I learned that lesson over the course of a decade. And I think I refined my craft as a pedagogue in light of the experience of working with young people. I always like to say that my students taught me how to teach. Listening to them, gaining their feedback, watching how they grew and developed was fundamental and instrumental to becoming a teacher. And I fundamentally have thought about myself as a teacher ever since then, even though now I'm a dean, I'm an administrator, I'm a vice provost, I hold different roles, but in essence, I'm a teacher in everything that I do. So I would say at the University of Central Florida, I was there during a significant growth period, 2000 to 2006. In fact, I was hired as one of 15 new faculty members in 2000. And as you probably know, UCF went from a regional state university in Florida to a truly global institution with dramatic reach, impressive growth, and now numbers, I think, north of 75,000 students or so, one of the largest universities in the country. And so what I witnessed there was both the sort of growing pains of growth, but also the necessity of growth, that many people were outside the boundary of higher education. And there's so much to be learned and gained from being part of a university system that we needed to expand our reach to, attract new audiences of students and to build new programming to meet them where they are, to have more cooperative programming that was community engaged. So a lot of those things I took with me in my career as well. And I think that's where I caught the bug of growth, I would say, when I was at
Mm,
UCF, because it was in a high growth environment. Then I transitioned to a very different institution, Columbia University Teachers College. And there, of course, historically ranked as one of the top or premier colleges of education in the world. It was a very different environment in that it was highly research intensive, very demanding of faculty in that regard. Working with doc students changed my life. I still interact with my doc students to this day. You develop very close personal relationships because you're working on a passion project for them and something you want to facilitate their growth and contribution to the field of knowledge. So that was in very many ways, a transformative experience as well. And I think positioned me well to do what I'm doing now at Lehigh. So a bit of that sort of trajectory. And again, it's always easy to make up in reverse, right? Or looking back over 35 years, like what resonated most. But I do think that in each of the places where I've been, I keep rooting back in the fact that we have a great thing in a university, access to knowledge, personal growth and development, and we need to share it as liberally as possible with as many people as possible. So I'm a big advocate of expanding our reach and growing because it ultimately reaches new audiences, new people, and gives
uh,
access to the beauty and value that is higher education.
yeah, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, and the fact that you like talking about it shows up in the 1,000+ citations you have on Google Scholar.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I do enjoy that part of it too. I mean, writing about is another form of teaching. I've always viewed
yeah,
my pedagogy as extending through my research. And so, I'm working on my fourth book. I've got some 80 publications, but in each of them, I have an intention to teach. And so that's always been the kind of voice of my work, and hopefully the way in which it's manifests in the world.
yeah, that's pretty awesome. For people who are thinking, who are already in the field and who are trying to climb up the ladder, other than opportunity, which of course without that nothing else will work. Other than opportunity, what would your lessons be for them if they're aspiring to be the dean at a school, at a university? How should they be thinking of getting there?
Yeah, I think part of it is the interpersonal walk of being better at listening, learning, attending to folks, being attentive in a situation, being present in a situation. A lot of what you do as a leader is you become a sort of channel for the body as a whole and trying to move in a direction that requires sort of a knowledge of and awareness of the needs of others. So I would say honing that aspect of your person is a super important skill for a leader in any context. I
Yeah,
think another piece of it is being able to accept criticism and feedback as something that you can grow from. It's challenging in leadership because you are sticking out in a sense, and it's easy
mhm,
to blame a single person when it's actually a system, or in some cases, it is a problem or a mistake that was made. So the ability to own those things, learn from those things, change as a result of those, that's a very important, capacity. And I think most people in leadership would agree you have to have a fairly thick skin. You can't wilt upon criticism. You have to grow from criticism. And partly being a faculty member, getting lots of feedback along the way in terms of your teaching, but also your research, your peer review process, helps you to develop the kind of thick skin quality that you need as a leader. I guess I'd
yeah,
say the other
yeah,
piece is most academics don't prepare on the business side of the work. And yet, as a dean, much of what I do is on the business side, balancing budgets, making sure we have a revenue stream that can support the staff that we have. Where do we grow? Where is the blue ocean opportunity for us? Like that ability to think like a business person is a super important piece that I was not formally trained in. And yet, I think you need to have some acumen on the business side to be an academic leader today,
yeah.
and to be a consequential academic leader. So I'd say
Yeah.
those are all really important. And yet, like I said, most academics don't come with that preparation unless you happen to be a business.
You know how I know you really practice what you preach there is you show up at every tech conference that we've met at, like we've bumped heads at so many conferences,
Yeah.
like SUGSV, you're always there. You're
Yeah.
talking to entrepreneurs, you're meeting
Right.
companies, you're seeing who's the next best vendor who's got some good technology. I don't see many deans do that. I
Yeah.
see a lot of deans are focused on curriculum, faculty, and building, the schools that they're responsible for, but just strategizing as thinking of it um, more as a, how can this grow
Right.
in terms of technology. I think you do a great job there. I mean, I think
Well,
that's
thank
where
you.
yeah.
Yeah, that is where we met historically. That's it. When we go back, it is one of those tech conferences. Right. So, I mean, the other piece I didn't mention was that I grew up in the high school where I taught was a tech school. It was heavily invested in technology very early. So I had the internet in my room in 1992 in my high school classroom. I did attendance in 1993 digitally. I had email in 1990 or 1991, right? So it was the kind of place where you were stuck in the sort of cauldron of technology. And I really came to see it as a great tool, as a resource to do our work better. And I never had the kind of technophobe feel that I think permeates education. Certainly not everyone, but there are plenty of people that are sort of fearful of technology and its reach. And now with generative AI and language models, it's gotten, sort of existential in terms of people's fear. I've never felt that way about it. I always felt it was a tool that could be used productively or not. And, I'm willing to be skeptical and take my turn at giving it a try. So there's that piece of it. I think the other piece for me was that recognizing the kind of the way in which the work that we're doing it doesn't meet so many people where they are. So many people are left outside of the of access to higher education, of access to any education. And I've done enough work in other countries now, some 50 plus countries, to know that this is a very valuable thing that people give up everything in their worldly possession to attain. And sometimes we can take it for granted. So my goal and my mission has always been not to make money per se. That's not the essence of, developing a new program. That's only a resource to be used to further our mission. The mission has to be to reach more people, to provide this great thing to more people. I'm friends with Michael W. Smith at Carnegie Mellon, and he has this great book, The Abundant University, which is all
Mhm.
about this idea that the university has this potential to be an amazing social resource. And yet, a lot of what the system does is it limits access to that system. So my mission is to expand that access at all, at every turn.
That's amazing. That's amazing, Bill. And for that, I always debate with educational leaders about this is, should we look at the university as a business, even though the fundamental value of a university is doing public good? But innovation, when you look at businesses that want to grow and help their users and their customers grow, um, like how do you think of the university system um, in the broad context of growth and strategy, and now with AI coming in, like, do you remain traditional? Like, give me a little bit of that.
Yeah, I'd say it's both end for me. It definitely operates on some business principles and practices, no doubt. Everything from HR to a general counsel's office, right? Everything you might expect to see in a corporation. You're right in that it ostensibly and should be about the public good. And we want to create structures and systems within universities that always point towards that North Star. But we can't ignore the fact that, our clients are our customers, our students. They are paying for a service. There is a kind of rendering of, of value for value. And that kind of commodity of exchange is just a reality of the transaction of being in higher education. So I'm not averse to the, use of business analogies and metaphors in the context of higher ed, like some folks are. And yet I'm also an academic who reads philosophy, so I don't think everything is commodifiable, and nor do we need to make it, reduced to that. I often
Mhm.
think that, in hindsight, that some academics use this as a kind of moral hedge against engaging in other practices. You know, it's like, well, we don't do that. We're above all that. And I don't think anyone's above extending access to people to higher education. I think we're all in that, and we should all be in that together. So my sort of take on this is that we ought to be steadfast in our commitment to providing more access to education, not less. And that's why I find the work that some institutions are doing, like Arizona State University, Western Governors University, Southern New Hampshire University, where they're like, no, we're going to expand dramatically the reach of this thing we value to more and more people. To me, that's what we all need to be doing institutionally.
Yeah,
That's what the whole sector needs to do. And if you listen to folks in business, that's what they're saying. If you listen to folks in government, that's what they're saying.
sure.
And so I think universities have to get on board with that. So whether you call it a business or not, it's a value commodification of value that is in exchange. And that has business-like attributes for sure. And it also goes beyond that.
I love it. And I mean, the names you mentioned, Western Governors, Southern New Hampshire, they're really pushing boundaries in terms of, how they look at the whole field of education, online, mostly online. There's a lot
Yes,
of technology there that's
right.
helping them educate students. And so do
And
you
and one
think
more thing I
that,
wanted to mention about this whole, like,
yes,
the difference of, so there's a lot of pressure in a university environment when you're in a leadership role to be very inwardly focused, like to make the trains run on time, so to speak, inside a college. And absolutely that's important. Like I will not dismiss that. Like the student experience, the faculty member, the staff member, that people enjoy what they're doing, they feel like it's functional, all of those pieces are important. But that's not enough. That's never been enough. You have to have an external locus. You have to be engaged with people in a network or series of networks that allow to inform your work and find what's of value there. What could we use here that they're doing there? So I'm always like traveling for that purpose, going to conferences, meeting with people who are edge thinkers, looking at new innovations and saying, how can we benefit from doing this kind of work here? Rather than just focused on the everyday here. Both are important, and I think oftentimes deans in particular can get really ratcheted down on the day to day and miss the big picture.
yeah, yeah, that's really good insight. And does missing the big picture also connect with the fact that a lot of times leaders at institutions who, even though they were really connected to students when they were a teacher, when they were, a chair of a department, once they get into roles like where you're at, they actually start losing connect with students.
Yes,
Uh,
that is a significant problem. And I do, so I taught before here. I'm trying to teach again next year. I'm on the docket. I've reached out to the chair. I said, I'm looking for a course next year. I don't care what it is. I want to
okay,
teach
because
because
you
I
want to
think
be
it's really
connected.
important to stay grounded in the work. And it's easy to lose sight of that, of getting disconnected from the work. I think that's a part. I think it's also, for me, it's part of my own biography. My parents were both high school dropouts. They were forced out of school at a young age.
Mm,
And so I'm an anomaly in my family. I'm the first in my family to go to university. Certainly, I wasn't focused on being a dean when I first went to college. Like I was just sort of going to college because it made sense for someone who did well academically to go to college. But I remember vividly how my dad and mom felt, in a sense, humiliated and excluded from society as a result of the fact that they weren't formally educated.
wow.
And I remember, and also a lot of my family members had similar backgrounds. And there is this sense that you weren't worthy unless you were educated. And
Yeah.
I've seen the sort of flip side of that. I've seen the moral righteousness that folks feel about being educated, and then frankly, the arrogance that comes with intellectual engagement. I think that's a problem. We haven't talked about that yet. Happy to. But then I've seen the flip side of that, which is the sense of humiliation that people feel and the social exclusion as a result of that. And so that's why I'm passionate about this work, because those people aren't any less intelligent, right?
Hmm.
They just have not been given the opportunities to engage. And so that's why access is such an important piece for my own narrative, and how I got to university. I mean, I got to university because I was self-funded, and the state of New Jersey had a scholarship program for future teachers. And I'm like, I've always thought about being a teacher. I guess I'll apply. I applied. I got a full ride to university, and I went from there. So I've really been a benefactor of that, both the insight of being an outsider, as well as someone who's been an insider and has benefited from the largesse of a society that values and invests in education.
It's pretty amazing. And yeah, and I kind of see all of that coming together in some of the work you're doing. I mean, the GCC, I read about it, the Global Competence Certificate that you help build, right?
Yes.
And it kind of brings everything together. It's more about interaction between faculty, students, and trying to keep that control over the fact that in the end, everything is about the student and the interaction with
Yes.
the student matters the most. Do you want to add something to that work that we're
Sure.
doing about it?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's exactly what I'm most passionate about right now, which is how can otherwise great universities like Lehigh University, Columbia, all these great universities that I've had the opportunity to be a part of, how can they be more user focused in what they do? How can they take what is good and make it great by being more user focused? Right now, most institutions are not terribly user focused. They are institutionally focused. They are faculty informed and focused, rather than what is the user experience and how do we improve that experience? And I get really micro on this. Like, what does a classroom look like? And how does a user, the student, have a sense of how they're developing as a result of a course of study? Where can they personalize it to their narrative? How can they see themselves fitting in something larger than themselves? Where do they see access to a job, a career, a prospect as a result of doing well in a particular course or within a particular area of study? Like, the things that I think happened to me sort of in a serendipitous way, in a just largely by chance and good luck. I want to develop in a systematic way so that we can actually draw out the value in every place across a learning institution and deliver it to students and say, here are options for you, right? So here's who you are now. Here's who this identity work we're doing with you in this course, in this program, in this area. And here is where it points outward. Here's what you might do as a result of this kind of work. Like, that kind of narrative arc for the lives of students is incredibly valuable. And yet, for many people my age, you had to kind of make that up as you went along.
Yeah.
With AI now, I think we can do this intentionally. We can do this with supports. We can do this in real time. If Netflix can tell me what my next favorite movie is going to be, I should be able to tell you what your next favorite class is going to be, or where you might use the talents that you have, in a wider social environment. So it's like making all of that connectivity across the system that AI and technology will facilitate, but we need to get better at the user experience. And that's the passion that I have now on campus and what I'm driving here at Lehigh, which is how do we reconfigure academic programs, courses of study, classes themselves, and individual units within classes so that the user always understands the path that they're on and what the next steps in that path are.
Pretty awesome. Talking about nexts, though, what's next for Dr. Gaudelli?
Yeah, so in about a month's time, I'll be a dean on assignment, and I'll be senior vice provost at Lehigh for education. And essentially, it's a role where I'm going to be coordinating and ideating and supporting and innovating around the educational project of Lehigh University. So that's in essence what the next step is for me here internally. And then I think another piece is how do we continue to move this wider conversation, like you're doing with your podcast, right, to a larger circle of folks so they understand, like, what are the imperatives for higher education? The fact that we have, some nearly 3/4 of the population that do not have a bachelor's degree. It doesn't mean we want to give everyone a bachelor's degree. That's not what I'm saying. But we ought to really take seriously the idea of lifelong learning and provide access to that, like some platforms are already doing, but expand the reach of those to reach every person, regardless of what credentials they happen to have. So that to me is a passion project that I want to continue to advance, both here at home, but also working in other countries where it is direly needed, absolutely, where there's a system that won't fill every need. So how do we build a more resilient and a greater capacity in a higher ed system that really reflects the needs of the population where we happen to serve?
I love it, Bill. I mean, I've seen you, I've known you for a few years, and I know you're really resilient. You're always thinking about the next steps. And too bad we won't be meeting at NAFSA. Yeah, I mean, conferences is where I meet you, and I see you talking. Sometimes you're on the stage talking about some of these things, and I'm glad you shared some of that information with us and our listeners on this podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, happy to do it, Ashish. I really enjoyed the conversation and happy to do it again. It's something I'm deeply passionate about, and we need more in higher ed who are, for sure.
I love it. You're definitely in that top 5% there. So yes, thank you so much for joining our listeners once again. For you, this is Dr. William Gaudelli, the Dean of the School of Education at Lehigh University, with us on our Edu Unlocked podcast with me, Ashish Fernando. Until next time, till we have another esteemed guest on our podcast, goodbye and take care, everybody. Thank you.